Hey guys, welcome to Balance Tip Tuesdays with your host, myself, Dr. James Spencer, the Balance and Movement Doc, and my colleagues, Coach Don Stanley and Coach Mike Katz. Welcome, fellas.
Hey guys.
Thanks, Doc. How's it going?
Good to see you guys. So, Don, thank you so much for filling in the last few weeks with the Balance Tip Tuesdays and running the cash base module last week with Mike Jones. And we got a lot of good feedback from that from the listeners. And I felt like, it's a great idea to start plugging in some of the business tip Tuesdays into our little routines. So I wanted to do a little follow up this week with, how we three have been successful starting and running our entities there, and really how to share that with some of the listeners and some of the young coaches and chiros out there who may be watching. So Don, why don't you kick it off, big guy?
Yeah, guys. So I just wanted to say this. You know, I just hit my 30th year of professional coaching, and I've been a therapist almost as long as that. So I got my first gig as a personal trainer when I was 18, and I did a year and a half of pre-med, and then I went to technical college for massage therapy. And at that point, everybody was gearing up for the 96 Olympics. So instead of doing all the spa work, I went into myofascial release and structural integration and sports massage and sports medicine. And so at the very onset of my career, I did an apprenticeship with a local chiropractor. And then right out of school, I cut my teeth, working for chiropractors. I did a lot of personal injury. Actually, at that time, which would have been, 92, 93, massage therapist in Florida used to bill insurance. I know that that's changed a lot. So through the course of my career, particularly in the early part of my career, I worked with a lot of chiropractors. And, over the years, particularly in the last 10, 15 years, I've, worked with a lot of physical therapists, athletic trainers. But early on in my career, throughout my career, I've worked for and worked with a lot of chiropractors. So I have a lot of working knowledge of that industry. And there's actually a lot of parallels to, my industry as well. And so, from being a personal trainer at 18 years old, my business is really, looking back, I wouldn't even say for the first 5 years I was really running a business. I was just a gym rat that was, interested in a bunch of stuff and kind of like a lot of people trying to turn my hobby into a business. And, I managed to, this is like, the fitness industry, and I think the chiropractic, like our industry as a whole, I always think about that scene in the movie As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson, where he takes the puppy and he puts it down the garbage chute. And he was like, yeah, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, right? So I feel like, I do weird stuff. Like I go on the Bureau of Labor Statistics and I look at the average career of a trainer. It's under 5 years, right? So what that means is most of the people that are in the industry today weren't here 2 years ago, and they probably won't be here a year from now, right? So if you're lucky enough, luck and skill to survive 5, 7, 9 years in this industry, both as a fitness professional and certainly as a medical professional, you start to get some perspective. And so at some point, for a variety of different reasons, I made this distinction because like everyone on this panel, I have studied extensively. Like I spent the last 15 years travel. Part of my approach as a business person is I said I want to be one of the best trainers in America. And so my thought process on that is, well, how am I going to do that? Well, I traveled around and I studied with the top performance specialists in my industry and developed relationships with them, including the gentleman on the panel. That was part of my business approach. Okay. And so I studied extensively as a trainer, performance coach, also as a therapist. Now, something that was interesting is several years ago, I made this distinction and I said, listen, it is tremendously valued to be a subject matter expert in your field, tremendously valued. But it also creates a level of bias where you become too close to the forest to see the trees. So for me, I found it incredibly valuable to study outside of my industry as well. So I've done a lot of business coaching, and a lot of the business coaches I work with come from direct marketing, real estate, finance. And it's very interesting, their approach, particularly to our industry, because they're not biased by our industry. So a lot of their insight is it's just neutral. And so earlier today, Dr. Spencer and I were talking about, I learned in particular back in, I think it was like 2011 to 2013, I worked with a business coach extraordinaire, Jeffrey Combs. Shout out, Coach Jeff. And Jeff works with a lot of, six-figure income producers, particularly in direct marketing and real estate. And he really helped me understand the psychology, because I'm studying about the psychology of sales and closing and all of this. And I really started to, I always want to call it the dark arts of all of the reasons why and how people just self-sabotage themselves. And Doc Spence and I were phases of your career, right? So check this out. In the beginning, as a new trainer and as a new clinician, I call it Johnny on the spot. Like, I moved to Boca Raton, Florida in 2009, and I moved to Boca specifically because I wanted to get involved in the golf industry. And at that point, let's say I'm 15 years into a career, whatever, 17 years into my career, subject matter expert in biomechanics, sports medicine, all this kind of stuff. And I started talking to people, and they're like, tell me about your golf game. And I'm like, well, I don't play golf, right? So they didn't really want to talk to me. And I found out about this thing called the Titleist Performance Institute, and I started studying their curriculum, and I established myself as a foremost authority in golf, being somebody that actually didn't play golf, right? Yeah. So that was, part of my approach. So when I first moved to Boca in 2009, Johnny on the spot. What did that mean? If you called me for an appointment, I was always available. If you wanted me at your house at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was there. If you wanted a 5 o'clock appointment, I was there. And I did that for like a year and a half. And I got busy, and I started to make money. And then at some point, I started to make more money. And I don't remember whether I did it on purpose or, we've all had those clients where you say, well, how much is it? Well, I'm 60 an hour. Well, how about I pay you 80? Well, okay, sure. Why not? I'll take money, right? And so I started to get busy, and then maybe I got a little bit tired, and I started to say no, right? Yeah. And something very interesting happened when I said no. I got twice as busy, right? So I got twice as busy. Now, this is particularly relevant to the cash-based business, and I talked about this a little bit last week. I can speak as an outsider to this. Doc Spence and I were talking about this. The age that we live in now with social media, you guys have a tool that you're not even aware of, because here's the thing. This is how chiropractic works. In the beginning, all we're thinking about is just becoming a doctor, just becoming a trainer, right? You're not thinking about your career 10, 15 years down the road. So I talked about this a little bit last week. Here's my view of the chiropractic industry. Go to school, and at this point, you get out as a new clinician, and you've got a quarter to $500,000 worth of debt right out of the gate. And what does everybody do? You take a job as an associate. That's what everybody does. And generally, depending on your market, Doc, you can correct me. Let's say you start out at 60 to 65 years as an associate, right? I got out of massage school and I went to work for a chiropractor. Let's say I'm making $20 an hour. So whether you're an associate or a therapist or even a new trainer, and what happens when you take that job as an associate? They crush you with volume. And listen, in the beginning, that volume is very important. It's very good, because that's when it's super important. You need to go through that process, because that's when you do, number one, you develop your clinical skills. If you're a trainer or physical, you develop your training skills, you develop your communication, and you get a lot of reps, right?
Exactly. So John, I don't want to cut you off there, but yeah. I'd like to add a point. I'd like to add a value point to that.
Yes.
A mentor of mine, Dr. Dennis Evans, he's been running a cash-based business for, I would say, close to 25, 30 years. And his biggest piece of advice that he shared with me, that I really asked him about, what's something that I can share with the youth of today and in this particular forum. And he said, put your hands on as many people as possible.
So important.
And that's, to your point, it's be a yes man or a yes woman. Do whatever you can to get your hands on as many people to develop your clinical skill.
With a caveat, because here comes the trap, right? You take a job as an associate because you're out of school. You're like, I need to go to work. and you don't have the marketing skills and you don't have the hands-on experience. You're like, okay, I'm going to go to work for somebody. And when you're right out of school, Doc, what your first job that you took as a chiropractor, fresh out of school, what was your pay rate, if you don't mind me asking?
I think I was a little more unique than what most people, but
Okay.
I was pretty close to six figures.
Wow. And that's very unusual, because usually, as depending on your market, as an associate, let's say you're 60, 65, right? So here's what happens. If you can hack it, let's say over a 2 to 3 year process, you're part of the machine, you're cranking it out, you're seeing that volume of patients, you're developing your hands-on skills, you're developing your rapport, your communication. If you're a good clinician or associate, I work for several chiropractors, and one thing I was really good at, the doctor was very busy and he didn't have the time to spend with each of the individual patient, but I did. And I was very good at making the doctor look good and promoting the doctor. So, okay. So you put in 1 to 3 years as an associate. Okay. And if you're good, you get that bump, right? You go, let's say you go 65, maybe 70, maybe 75. And therein lies the trap. Because if you're making $75K a year, now look at South Florida. What is $75K a year after taxes? 61, 62, maybe 60, right? If you live in a lot of places, $60,000 a year after taxes is not enough for a mortgage, okay? Pay off your student loans and save any money.
Yeah.
And here's the trap. Nobody is going to quit a $75K a year job to go back and start all over. I've had a conversation with more than one chiropractor that's in the school, and here's my advice. Okay. While you're in school, get really good at marketing yourself on social media. You got 4 years or 3 or whatever the program is to market yourself and build up a following, so that when you got out of school, you've already got yourself a little client base.
Absolutely.
But if you dip your toe in that water and go from associate and get to 75K, you will never leave.
Yep.
So that's what I talked about last
year. I want to add a point to that, Don. I think something else that you can really do in that kind of a situation is find somebody that you look up to and find somebody that you value, that you can actually shadow.
Yes.
Someone like Dr. Spencer here, who's done the cash-based business. See what it's like with boots on the ground, shadow them, spend some time with them, see what that looks like. So that way, when you do come to that bridge that you're talking about, Don, you're well informed, you understand exactly what kind of goes on, what are the steps that kind of goes into that situation, and you can make an educated decision. And, like you already said earlier, does that mean that you can't, be an associate? No, you can definitely get your hands on as many people as possible, and you can get the reps in and do all of that. But you've already created this bridge. You've already created this relationship. You've already understood what's on the other side of that. Yeah. And then you can start to transition into that whenever you feel like the time is appropriate, before it's too late.
Absolutely.
And listen to your point, but for both of you, not everybody's meant to be the boss.
100%.
And if that's the case, that's fine. If you're scared to market yourself or you don't know how to market yourself, fine. And maybe go be an associate for a few years to get some experience. But also, just to Mike's point, have in the back of your mind, find that mentor that you can shadow for the next 2 years while you get some money and some confidence and some clinical skills.
Yep, absolutely. So Doc and I earlier today, we were talking about phase 1, Johnny on the spot, right? You're out there, you're available all the time, any hour of the day or night, and you can make money that way. And then at some point, you'll start to get busier. You'll start to get a little bit tired, and you start to say no. And a lot of people are scared to say no, but we'll all agree on the panel is when you start to say no, it creates a level of exclusivity, and all of a sudden you get twice as busy. And that's phase 2, twice as busy, right? Phase 3, Doc and I were talking about this, and this is something that a lot of people never get there. But phase 3 is like this. You're a successful practitioner. Okay, you're develop your craft, you're good at what you do, and you're good at communicating what you do, so you're busy. Okay, and so like one of the things for me is I've had the distinct pleasure since about 2016 to be good friends with Dr. Spencer and see his cash-based business up close and how it's evolved. Okay, and so similar to myself, from 2009 to 2016, every single year my business grew and got bigger. And so over the last several years with Dr. Spencer, from 2016 to now, every season he's gone into a season where he got busier, got more clients, said no more, got more clients, got higher paying clients, increased his rates. So here's the interesting part. Do that for 5 or 6, 7 seasons. You're making a ton of money, but you start to get burned out. And not only that, but you start to really, the psychology of clients really starts to affect you, you know, dealing with that all of the time. And so then you start to become even more exclusive and say like, hey, I'm like a battery as a clinician, as a coach, as a therapist. I'm putting my energy into my craft and into my clients, and I'm passionate about what I do. And I bring it and I bring it and I bring it season after season after season. That's a finite resource. And at some point you start to feel the volume, and it starts to weigh on your spirit a little bit. And then so you start to become more aware of, you know, negative energy and clients that are not really compliant, or they want you to fix them while they're passive, or they want to complain and not really own their health or their treatment plan. And then you just start to say, hey, you know what? I don't want that anymore. So then that second level of no, where you start to, you know, shut that down. And then, and then again, right? Then you get even more busy, you know?
Well, it's two books I'd like to allude to on this, and both are written by the same author, is Choose Yourself by James Altucher. And he became the first guy to do a website for a very famous movie company. And he did it at a very cheap rate just because he became the guy who did it for a movie company. And that bought him more business to bring in. But to your point, he then wrote a book called The Power of No. Right. Yeah. And that was just based off of the book, The Power of Now. His theory was just to what you were saying, Don, is when he started to say no more frequently, that allowed him exclusivity, and he allowed himself to charge higher rates then.
Yeah.
So, and I know, Mike, you can attest to this as well. When you get super swamped when you were down here in South Florida, you had to exclude yourself a little bit. And because of this clientele that you started to see a lot of people down here.
100%. And one of the main things about that is exactly what Don alluded to. When you're doing that, you know, you put a lot of this resource, you know, called energy into what it is that you do. And if you become too busy, then you're not going to be able to provide the product and the level of service that you want to provide. So then it comes that next step that you talk about is, hey, let's remove the people that are draining that energy and create some space to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're putting the proper time into programming and the proper time into delivering that high quality product that you are, you know, promising, you know, your patient or client.
Yeah. And I would say both Mike and I, this is, you know, very interesting parallel, is that we're both very experienced, highly sought after coaches, right? And there's not a gym in town that wouldn't love to have us on the staff. Okay. So we both worked, you know, in other people's places. But here's what's interesting is you reach a point in your career, whatever level you're at, where you need to charge enough to make a living. And so as a fitness professional, it's very difficult. Let's even just like give an example, you know, South Florida, a guy like Mike or I, 150 to 200, 225 an hour. Okay. So the gym will charge the client that, but that's not what they're going to pay us. Okay. So you need to charge enough to make a living, and it's very difficult to do as an employee. So then you're almost in a position where like, okay, I reached a point in my career where I really can't work for anybody else, which means that I have to go out on my own. And when you go out on your own, it's a totally different animal. Like my business coach, Jeffrey Combs, talks about developing the habit, skills, and mindset required to be successful. And what that means is the market does not care what you don't like. You don't like sales? Okay, great. Your competitor loves sales. You don't like marketing? Great. Your competitor loves marketing, right? So like, Mike, I'd love for you to chime in on like what, you know, some of your experience where very, very high level practitioner, very well respected, transition from being the lead trainer at a very high-end boutique gym into now opening his own brick and mortar?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Don. And to kind of leverage into that, I just want to bring up exactly what you just brought up, Dr. Spencer, about, hey, not everybody's meant for that, right? So the really important thing that I would say to the listeners is have a really honest moment of self-reflection and find out what things you are capable of doing, both in your craft and on the side, like Don just said. You know, are you interested in doing the marketing? Are you interested in doing the sales? Are you interested in hitting the pavement, and so on and so forth? And then have another honest conversation with yourself about, you know, your level of coaching, your level of expertise. You know, am I at the level where I'm going to be able to draw these people in just based off of my personality and my level of expertise alone, without maybe a large, you know, company behind me? So I think with those two honest conversations, and if you do decide that the answer is yes to both of those things, that's probably the best thing that you could do, is to make that jump. If you are a high level coach and you're a high level practitioner of whatever your area of expertise is, find an area that's a niche that you feel really, really comfortable in, that people really specifically are drawn to you for, and, you know, go for that. You know, like you said, use social media, you know, leverage the clients that already believe in you and already think the world of you, and, you know, go for that own business that you feel like that you are truly capable of doing, because that's going to take your, you know, your level from here, you know, up to here. Because exactly what you just said, Don, same thing for the 75K ceiling, you know, in the medical, you know, situation, the medical world, you're going to hit that ceiling as a trainer. And if you are as good as you think that you are, you're never going to be able to reach the level that you're truly capable of going with the amount of percentage that you're seeing out the door.
Listen, Mike and I both worked for a similar company, and the owner touted a couple of his top trainers that were making six figures. But here's the caveat, right? Yes, they were making six figures, but they were mid 30s and they were working 60, 70 hours a week. And they had high paying clients, but they were also doing a bunch of half-hour $30 sessions. So to me, at this phase in my career with a young son and a family, you know, I want to make six figures working 30 to 40 hours a week. My days of 60, 70 hours a week and being in the gym, or in this case, being in the practice, you know, those days are gone. It's just not sustainable. You can do that in your 20s, but when you start to get in your mid 30s, if you're still doing that, and then this is the really scary part. And, you know, I've heard, you know, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. He talks about burn your boats, right? So it's a scare. I don't think anybody, Doc, I'm sure you'd agree. When you say I want to be a doctor, I don't think anybody really knows what they're getting themselves into when they go to medical school. And part of this whole thing is to really open your eyes, right? Because Mike brings up a good point, and you do as well, where it's like, you've got to be really honest with yourself. And like I said, not everybody is cut out to be a gym owner, to be, you know, their own boss. But here's the scary part. Right? At this point in my life, in my career, I'm almost 50, man. I don't know what my other alternative is, right? If I can't, like, what, I'm going to go work for somebody and I can't make enough to make a living? Or listen, back in like 2008, I knew several chiropractors where, like, they just weren't any good. They couldn't market themselves and pick up clients and changes in insurance, and they went out of business. And to be frank with you, if you're a clinician that can't cut it as a clinician and you go out of business, I don't know what else those people are doing. I don't think that student loan goes away just because you could make money as a doctor. So that's a really scary thought, to say, like, hey, here's my choices. Make 75K a year as associate, or maybe 80, not make enough to make a living, and I'm 45 or 50 years old and I still haven't paid off my student loans, but I don't have what it takes to be a business owner. That's not a place that you want to be. I will say this, and I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, to your point, there's also a lot of things that you can learn by having experts help you, whether it's mentors like Mike alluded to, or like personally, like we have a physician's financial advisor, somebody that can help you, you know, kind of knock off the student loans strategically versus, And I think what it all comes down to, it doesn't matter if it's in here or in y'all's business, is organization and having a plan.
Yes.
And we know people are not always compliant with the plan, but when they are, we know that the results will speak.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I like, even me over the years, I'm a trainer and a therapist, and sometimes those businesses have been integrated, and sometimes those have been two separate things. So when I started out early in my career, right, I don't know if I planned it that way, but it just turned out that I'm very well positioned. So Doc, for you, you decided fairly early on in your career the direction that you wanted to go. And that's the good news, is if you're a chiropractic student, or you're a new clinician, or you're a new trainer, and you're early on in your career, you've got enough time to teach yourself, business skills and marketing skills and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Mike, I'd like to give you a shout out for that koozie.
What you got?
It's just great.
Hey, we're representing.
We're a team. We're a team. Yeah. I think that's a very good place for all the listeners to digest some information and to come back with some questions for next week. And I guess my final point for you guys, do y'all have any other nuggets that you'd like to share, little short whimsicals that people can take home?
Mike?
I guess one thing that kind of came to mind when you guys were talking, and Spence, when you just kind of jumped in about having a mentor, it might not necessarily be someone in your field, kind of like Don was kind of alluding to before. There's so much information out there in various fields, whether that be business or marketing or customer service or relationship building. And it might even come from, somebody that you're treating or someone that you're coaching. We all work with like high performance, high level individuals. And, we're lucky to kind of be graced with some of these like high performers every single day. And just the nuggets that they share, on a daily basis with us. I'm sure you guys can relate to that, where they're providing, a heck of a lot of value to us while we're providing value to them. So I think find somebody that you really kind of connect with, and just, pick their brain, be a sponge. It might not necessarily be somebody from an area that you expect, but it's someone that you can really find value from anywhere in your life.
Yeah. My number one advice, I say this to trainers all the time, and I'm sure that it holds true, for clinicians as well, is your success in this industry has nothing to do with how good of a trainer or clinician you are. Technical proficiency, excellence is a given. If you want to be truly successful, your success is predicated on your ability to go out into your community and develop relationships and market yourself. And even as an associate, if I'm an associate and I'm on a salary and people are coming into the clinic to see me, the boss is going to notice that. That is going to be huge leverage. So, that's a big thing, is don't count on other people to feed you. Learn how to go out there and market yourself and pick up clients and patients.
And Mike, to your point, that was something I did this week.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, literally. It was, so when you have access to people who are very successful, ask questions. Majority of them are very willing to take you kind of under their wing and guide or mentor you, if you show that interest. And that's the thing, is kind of pay that forward to them and to younger people is, hey, what did you do to make yourself successful? What kind of nuggets can you share with me to help my business? And the majority of the people who you encounter or who you work with, you're going to learn something from. So I think that's a great place to stop for today, fellas. Really do appreciate y'all's time. And I think we've got plenty more of these little nuggets to share with everybody. And again, thank you.
I think you just...
Hey guys, I'm Dr. James Spencer. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to share my story of how I started a cash-based business. Thank you for investing in yourself first off. Truly, that is what starting and running a cash-based business is all about. With some hard work, this investment will provide you the freedom to be your own boss and create a sustainable work-life balance relationship. A mentor of mine and many of my other friends is Gary Vee. He always states, start the side hustle. The marketing guru promoted the idea of starting a side business while at your current job and how you could eventually grow into that full-time work. I was working as an associate in a chiropractic office, and I decided to start a kettlebell training group on the weekends. I was so nervous to ask people for money in exchange for my services. When I first started, I was offering $25 for small group kettlebell training and $75 for private one-on-ones, but I was still so nervous to ask for money. That's because I had an unhealthy relationship with money. My family didn't have an abundance of money when I was growing up. I knew I had to change this concept in my head if I was going to start charging more and having the confidence to charge more. Thankfully, one of my clients started paying me $150 for private. He said, "Your value that you're providing me exceeds the $75. And one of the best quotes that he shared with me was, "What's in your bank account is not what's in your client's bank account." You know, this statement really opened my eyes. You'll learn more about this in the PDF and this small presentation. Remember, the side hustle will become your business. When I was an associate, my good friend and mentor, Mike Jones, he was the guru behind my logos, my website, and a lot of my social media. He said, "Doc, this is the time that you need to start creating a brand. The brand will morph into what you want it to be when you take this side hustle and turn it into a full-time job." So eventually I started training enough clients and making enough money that it started to exceed what I was getting paid as a chiropractic associate. So I decided to turn this cash-based business into a full-time job. And thankfully at that time, I had a brand to simply implement. You know, I want you guys to learn from my mistakes. I didn't even know what an LLC was or how it protected any of us as clinicians or coaches. I've hired many business coaches to help guide me on this journey. I've learned a lot about myself as a person, a clinician, a coach, and a leader. I've also spent nearly $100,000 to learn what I'm going to share with you guys next. Some important factors when starting your own business. I think these key concepts will help you expedite what you're looking to achieve.